weekend we got a few lessons about Donald Trump's continued ability to command attention.
Donald Trump's iconic dance moves are sweeping the internet.
By command attention, I mean he is able to always be the center of attention, and he is able to focus attention where he wants it and away from where he doesn't want it.
What you should be talking about is the auto pen, because I think it's the biggest scandal, one of them in American history.
Two things that happened on Saturday. The first thing that happened was he posted a Truth Social post, basically calling Rosie O'Donnell something bad, and said that he had been considering taking away her citizenship. Now, that post went viral on both Shitter and Lefty, Blue Sky, and places like that, with people rightly saying this is an egregious abuse of power. They're right about that. But zero of these people, or almost zero of those people, said, why is he doing this? What elicited this?
Rosie O'Donnell, your favorite, even in Ireland, she cannot help herself.
The reason why Trump targets somebody is always very important. And frankly, we would do better saying, what is it that leads Trump to target somebody? Because let's do more of that thing. And in the case of Rosie O'Donnell, what she was doing, and she did this back a week ago Sunday, so this was a week before he did it, she did a TikTok. She does like 3 TikToks a week, and this was one of them. And as part, in the middle of the TikTok, and this sort of betrays how vulnerable they are, in the middle of the TikTok, she said,
and what a horror story in Texas. The flash floods in Texas, the Guadalupe River, children at a camp. And, you know, when the president got all of the early warning systems and the weathering forecast abilities of the government, these are the results that we're going to start to see on a daily basis.
It was a very simple, very moral post. Those of us on the left largely ignored it because we don't pay enough attention to TikTok. But both Fox and Newsmax went to town on it.
This is such a cheap shot. To use a tragedy like this to take a cheap political shot at Donald Trump. Shame on Rosie.
Here's my response to her. Hasn't Texas been through enough? They don't need Hurricane Rosie.
Like, they were super bugged that Rosie O'Donnell said, look, you know, if you fire the people who tell locals what extreme weather events are headed their way, they're not going to get out of the way in time, which is one of the things that happened in Texas.
The Guadalupe is starting to come up, and Shoemaker is no longer passable at this time.
Trollinger recorded the moment volunteer firefighters requested that a code red alert be sent. It came as early as 4:22 a.m., but dispatchers delayed, saying they needed special authorization.
Is there any way we can send a code red out to our Hunt residents asking them to find higher ground or stay home?
We have to get that approved with our supervisor.
If you required Kristi Noem to sign off on every expenditure over $100,000, things are going to get delayed.
According to a new report citing multiple FEMA sources, Secretary Noem did not sign off on deploying the agency's urban search and rescue team to Texas until this Monday, more than 3 days after the flood struck.
Allegedly, both the search and rescue got delayed, and in the middle of this huge swamp of calls to FEMA, she basically ended a contract to the contractor who was fielding those calls, and all of a sudden they started losing a bunch of calls of people who just survived a massive flood.
Now, you might be wondering what Secretary Noem was doing over that holiday week, and it turns out on Sunday, one day before finally signing off on the FEMA funding, as search and rescue efforts were frantically ongoing on the ground there, and the clock was ticking to find survivors, Noem did take the time to go to Instagram to generate some audience engagement.
So Rosie O'Donnell was right.
The thing that really stands out is I know the women and men of FEMA, and I know how they would respond and the actions that they would take to make sure that they're moving resources in to have things available, to anticipate what that state might need. And from the reporting that I've been reading, what it sounds like is that there's been added layers of administrative burdens that have been put in place that take away that agility that they normally have to be able to execute on their mission.
But the right wing had been stewing all week over the fact that she made a very moral critique of the effects of the big ugly bill that Trump had just signed into law.
Republicans cheered. As Republicans cheered. People will die as a result, and they've started already.
So Trump went after her and threatened to take away her citizenship. Now, I agree that threatening to take away the American citizenship of people who live in Ireland, I feel for that, right? Because I have Irish citizenship, and I don't think Rosie O'Donnell does yet. But, like, look, I do think it is alarming that Donald Trump is threatening to revoke the citizenship of people. I do think it important to identify that he can't legally do that. But I also think that if he is doing that to distract attention, to bully somebody because they call attention to something, you would do really, really well to say, what elicited this response?
I'm going to start calling her Rosie the Pivoter, Laura. No matter the topic, Rosie has perfected the ability to turn the story against Donald Trump.
You would do really, really well, rather than making his own tweet go viral, making Rosie O'Donnell's comment go viral, which is something that you and I tried to do in response once we figured it out and you isolated it. So that's an example of how Trump succeeds in directing attention. Maybe I'm overstating, but in my opinion, I've never seen Trump struggle to manage attention like he has, starting in that cabinet meeting.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
DOJ, after months of promising the world with the Epstein files, basically told Trump's base they weren't going to get the Epstein files.
Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second?
And in response to this, and by the way, they botched it, right? Like, so they said, here are videos of what people were led to believe was Epstein's cell. Here are videos showing nobody going in and out, so he must have killed himself. This is what Dan Bongino looked at, and having watched it, determined that Epstein must have killed himself. One of the things they don't tell you is that's not actually Epstein's cell. It's the kind of lobby that you would have to walk through to get up to Epstein's cell, because one of the things we learned, and there's a DOJ IG report by a then credible, he's since moved to the Fed, by a then credible inspector general who said basically the conditions in the prison were so bad that there weren't good cameras to figure out there wasn't a camera inside Epstein's cell, for example. So for one thing, they led people to believe they were looking at the door of Epstein's cell. That's not true. And frankly, that part of the response has yet to go viral, but it will. But then the other thing is, right in the middle of the video that they said was raw video, there's a break. There's a 1-minute break between 11:58 and 12 o'clock p.m.
The footage cuts and the timestamp jumps a whole minute as questions of the so-called missing minutes spiral into full-blown conspiracy theories, and new reporting shows even more footage may be missing.
I said when I looked at it, I'm like, this is a break for a day. I understand how bad this prison is. It's got, it's something having to do with the archaic nature of these systems. And that is the excuse that Pam Bondi gave. But in then looking closely at the file, Wired reported that this video was actually saved in May after the time that Dan Bongino said, no, look, Epstein killed himself, and the time that Bongino went on Fox and said, we're going to release this video.
The metadata showed the footage had been edited using Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a professional editing tool, and it was saved several times and stitched together from 2 separate clips.
In other words, this isn't the raw video. They oversold the video. They haven't given us the raw video. And these are the kinds of things with conspiracy theories that are just going to cause more conspiracy theories. But the big thing was, so at this cabinet meeting, which cabinet meetings for Trump are sort of public displays of obeisance from his cabinet. They're not actually meetings. They're performative.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas.
They're Kim Jong-un kind of propaganda. And in the middle of this, a journalist asked Pam Bondi why there was a minute gap in the file, and Trump interrupted. And had he not interrupted, had he left it well enough alone, maybe this maybe we could have moved on. But Trump interrupted and he said,
"Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable."
None of that was compelling. None of that was believable. He's a reality TV star and he flubbed his lines. But also, like, of course we're still talking about it. Your DOJ issued an announcement about it. Like, you've invited this kind of discussion. And between the DOJ announcement and Trump's statement, all of these Trump supporters have, unsurprisingly, gotten more conspiratorial.
Trump swam in the conspiracy theorist waters for years, and now finally the sharks in those waters are coming to try and get him.
I mean, this was always a conspiracy theory.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah.
It was always QAnon adjacent. There's a report out there showing that 30% of Trump's base is QAnon adjacent.
Well, let's talk about 2024, Harris versus Trump margin, right? QAnon believers. Look at this margin that Donald Trump built up among QAnon believers. He won them by 61 points, or it was at least leading amongst them by 61 points back during the 2024 campaign.
So in other words, you've got a third of Trump supporters who believe as a matter of faith that Jeffrey Epstein is one of the keys to finding out the evil pedophiles behind people of power.
Donald Trump would not have won the presidency in 2024 if it were not for the backing of QAnon believers.
And Donald Trump is dismissing it and saying, and then on Saturday after the Rosie O'Donnell post, he released another post, which was also failed in execution, saying, you know, no one cares about Jeffrey Epstein.
It's pretty boring stuff. He's dead. He's gone.
Oh, a third of your base cares very deeply about Jeffrey Epstein, as if, you know, it's an article of faith.
Release the Epstein files, am I right?
In the post and some of the other things Trump said, he also, this was astounding. He claimed for the first time ever that Democrats created the Epstein file.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work.
What he was trying to do, and I get it, what he was trying to do is say, just like Hillary Clinton created the Steele dossier, just like Joe Biden created the Hunter Biden fake letter, Russia,
and all the other hoaxes.
Jeffrey Epstein is just more of the same. It's just a hoax that Democrats have invented to make me look bad.
But it's just really, it's just a subject. He's dead, he's gone, and...
Now, first of all, there's a problem, because if they had done that, they would have released it. And that's what his post then says, which is, why didn't they release it? Like, dude, your post isn't even logically consistent. Because if they did invent this, like the Steele dossier, if it was really damning, then they, you know, according to you, they would have released it.
By admitting that the Epstein files are real and have been written, and that you've read them and you don't like their contents and they were written by your enemies, doesn't make the most compelling case.
So you see, even people like Benny Johnson, who may be the stupidest fucking MAGA out there, even Benny Johnson's like, wait a second.
As far as I'm concerned. Holy moly.
This doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense. But if even Benny Johnson gets that it doesn't make sense, you're in trouble, Donald Trump. So anyway, you've got his snowflake deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, who wouldn't go to work on Friday because he's boo-hoo-hooing at home. And the anniversary of him almost being killed.
You know, I have a job to do, so I don't like to think about it much.
He's really trying to tamp this down.
The more you think about it, the more you see it.
But I have never seen Trump fail to be able to grab and refocus attention. You know, I do think that that was one of the things he was trying to do with yesterday's celebration of almost being assassinated. Celebration of his supporter, the fire guy who was assassinated, who was killed. celebration, he's saying, God picked me.
God was protecting me.
And everyone's like, well, what about those girls who died in the flood in Texas?
But God was protecting me.
The question is whether it'll go away. And, contrary to what a lot of people believe, Democrats have laid the foundation to be able to kind of pivot on this, right? HJC oversight, Ron Wyden, they've been asking Pam Bondi for months for more information about what she's doing, for Trump's involvement of it all.
Last year, the Biden administration allowed our investigators to look at portions of the file. We did that at the Treasury building. Here is what it says. Treasury's Epstein file details, Mr. President, 4,725 wire transfers. Let me repeat that. 4,725 wire transfers, adding up to nearly $1.1 billion flowing in and out of just one of Mr. Epstein's bank accounts. If you ask me, that is more than 4,000 potential lines of investigation right there.
Months ago, before all this happened, they raised the stakes of Trump's personal involvement in the decision not to release anything. And then after last week's meltdown, those requests back in May, back in April, back in March, those are going to resonate. Then Chris Van Hollen last week got a unanimous amendment to preserve all the documents and force Pam Bondi to answer questions.
I think it's really important that Attorney General Bondi now release everything. The grand jury proceeding transcripts are not enough. You just reported on all the other evidence that's out there in the form of videotapes, FBI notes, and other things. So when the president says, oh, we'll do the grand jury testimony, that, of course, just raises questions about all the other material that they're not planning to release.
Because Republicans, elected Republicans aren't going to say, well, we don't want to know about the Epstein files. It's not going to end Trump's presidency. But Trump's superpower is one of his two superpowers. One is to polarize people. The other one is to command and redirect attention. That is his superpower. That is how he has gotten out of every single scrape, legal scrape, corruption scrape.
Multiple breaking news developments on Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein.
That is how he has gotten out of every single one of those, is to take attention and redirect it.
Donald Trump filing a libel suit against the Wall Street Journal over its new Epstein reporting.
If that begins to fail with his base, with the 30% of his base that treats QAnon as faith, that means that his superpower is beginning to fail him.
Also late today, Trump's DOJ filing a motion to unseal grand jury testimony about Epstein.
Doesn't mean the end. It's just something to keep an eye out for.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?